all over like so.
Yeah, and I guess it's Bruce, the work like, so he just hired somebody staff just
Because the guy, so I'm a little anxious, you know, this summer.
Oh. Do you want me to open it up?
Yeah. Oh, you know, well, yeah, that's.
Is it okay?
Yeah, sure, you can share the screen.
And then we'll check this. And the video in this room is from that camera. They're going to show us here, so I can have it on for.
Yeah.
Yes. Cancel. I don't know if it's a to All right, safety. Good. We'll wait until Tina, I think Jessica's going to. Right, we're good.
Thank you.
And I.
Pretty good. Pretty good. What have you been up to?
Oh, okay. And that's why. Yeah, we would just. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Unless I.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand. I'm just looking at all the things that I just saw.
Just go out and try to find it. So we can
I guess I'll change it.
And we should spread them.
So everyone can enjoy it. That's part of what's still now.
Sure, yeah. Sending extras to the next.
It's really nice thing.
Everybody working on their boosters. If you have questions, you can email me. I have in the assignment, there are templates, if you don't have a booster yet, there, because they are set up. There's like a specific word.
No, this one is here. They're doing two places high school team and doing alumni match. So the kids who graduated and are playing in college or whatever comes back. So I think like they're like super yeah.
Just let me know.
Yeah.
And we'll get all the links in this.
And then, so we're gonna have.
Yeah.
I work for site, but
Okay.
I was trying to resist temptation.
Yeah.
Hey, that's the grass.
Yeah.
I only let myself get up with But it's always good.
These friends, they haven't seen.
It's just it's an obligation. Yeah.
All right, everybody, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Dr. Timilsina got his PhD in Forest Biometrics from the School of Forest Resources and Conservation at the University of Florida in 2010. After a few years as a postdoctoral research associate at the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, where he was an associate professor of forest mensuration and biometry until December 2021. He joined Clemson as an associate professor in January 2022. His past research focused on forest measurements, growth, and yield models, ecosystem services, mainly carbon, biomass, and bioenergy, urban and community forests, and applying statistical tools and answering forest management questions. So without further ado, I'll give it off to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica.
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah. Good to finally meet you after email correspondence. So thank you all for coming in. Yeah. It's a nice day outside, right? You could be outside enjoying the beautiful weather, but you decided to be here. So I appreciate that. Maybe you're interested in my talk, right? Thank you. Thank you for coming in. Again, my name is Nilesh Timilsina. I'm originally from Nepal. How many of you know Nepal? She's from Nepal too. So, and Nepal is between, it's a small country between India and China. And Nepal is popular for Himalayas and Mount Everest and high mountains. If you're into mountaineering or rock climbing and things like that, it's a good place to visit and go. So, and I've been living in the US. I went to graduate school, did my master's and PhD in the US, and then I worked in the University of Wisconsin for 8 years before moving to Clemson. Okay. So this is my first year at Clemson. Hopefully, everything will be fine. Thank you again for coming. So the topic of my talk today is dark heart of sugar maple in Wisconsin. So if we human beings, if we have dark heart, that's bad, right? Dark heart is bad. So dark heart is also bad in sugar maple trees. So that's that's part of my presentation today. So let me start the presentation. It was just working.
Maybe click the presentation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, thank you. So sugar maple is a very important hardwood species. It's a economically important species. I think it's found in Wisconsin. It's a very important component of the northern hardwood forest. It's widely distributed, from Carolinas to Maine to Minnesota, and it's economically very important. And the light colored wood, like light tree, this kind of tree wood is desired, and that's used for making cabinetry, furniture, musical instrument, and things like that. So if there is some kind of defect or some kind of discoloration in the wood, if you can see in this picture, that's not considered desirable. And in some cases, some people prefer that, but in most of the cases, that's not desirable. It's seen as negative. So what that does is that will reduce the value of the wood. So, and when foresters or landowners, when they are trying to manage sugar maple, they want to maximize the internal rate of return. That means they want to get a value, much more value, as much value as they can from that particular tree. Okay? So when we talk about sugar maple, a sugar maple saw timber or sugar maple saw timber can be divided into different product classes. So a grade 3, the different product classes are grade 3 sugar maple log, grade 2, grade 1 veneer, prime veneer. So you can see that this different grade decides the price for the same volume. If you have a veneer, prime veneer, you get higher price for veneer, you get lower price than that. So this is the best product. This is the best product. And this, as you go down, the product quality becomes worse and you get less price. So in order to qualify for this kind of these product classes, what they do is they look at the quality of the tree. They look at the size of the tree, the bigger the size, and they also look at the defects around the tree. So bigger the tree size and less the amount of defect, better the product quality will be. And usually so they look at outside, when they grade this kind of tree, what they do is they look at outside the tree like this. Okay? Look at the outside of the tree like this. And they measure that, they figure out what is the diameter of the tree. And then they look for this kind, these are some of the defects in the tree or the log we have. This is called sweep, this is crook. These are like green shakes and cracks. This is the same, this is not. So they look for this kind of defects in the tree and also look at the diameter of the tree. So this another example here is this is a log of the tree, or this could be a log or a standing tree. Okay, standing tree. So when I say log in a tree, usually they look at the first log, that is the first 16-foot section of the tree. Okay? And now, so what they do is they look at the log, and this is a defect, this is a defect, and this is the area that is defect free is called clear cutting. Okay, clear cutting. So larger, the bigger the amount of clear cutting and less defect, and bigger the size of the tree. This is a simple explanation. When there are complications in that, this simple explanation is just higher the amount of clear faces and less defect, and bigger the size, you'll get more value out of it. So veneer, prime veneer has bigger in size, less defects. Okay, so they usually what they do is they look at the outside of the standing tree, the first 60-foot section of the standing tree. They look at the tree, figure out what the defects, what the size, and they decide, okay, this is log 1, this is grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, or grade 4, and then they rank the product classes like that. And higher the grade, more value you get out of the wood. But the problem is sometimes you can have not outside defect, you can have defect inside the tree. This kind of defect is for in sugar maple. This is not common. This is not common in sugar maple. This is not natural. It's not natural, so you can see this kind of internal defect. Okay. So what this does is from outside you might have a veneer or prime veneer quality tree or a log, but once you harvest and once you buck the log, you see this kind of defect that might reduce the quality. Of veneer can be a grade 2 or grade 3, okay, it might reduce the price. So, and this is called dark hard or facultative hard or false hard. There are different terms used for this kind of defect in sugar maple. So this is basically this is the discoloration of the xylem, and that can be of different shapes, different size. So again, the goal here is you have outside, you graded the tree from looking at outside, but what about inside the tree? How does that affect the quality product you're getting from that tree. So in some species like cherry, black cherry, and black walnut, this kind of dark heart is the natural process. So this kind of dark heart, they have the heart, natural heart, and this kind of uniform dark heart, this kind of wood is desirable in those kind of species. But in sugar maple, this is not natural and not common in every tree, but most of the trees you will see this, but it's not common and natural. And this is disregarded as undesirable. So what causes this? There are several different hypotheses. So first thing is that the main reason is injury or trauma to the tree. If there is some kind of branch death, and in this kind of wound, or some kind of mechanical damage to the tree, and the wound from that kind of mechanical damage or branch death, you can have fungal infection and microbial activity can enter the tree from those kind of wounds. And those microbial activity will cause oxidation of the wood, and that will cause that kind of dark heart in the tree. And studies they have looked at the pH, moisture, and mineral content of that kind of dark heart compared to the sapwood outside. They have seen that it has higher pH, less moisture, and higher mineral content in that dark hardwood compared to the background or the sapwood surrounding it. So what we're trying to do here now is, and you can see here, these are examples of, you see some trees, they have hardly any dark heart. I mean, this is almost negligible, right? Some trees, they have this irregular shape, dark heart. This is like circular shape. There are all kinds of dark heart. Like some trees, you cannot see, even this is some dark heart, but in some trees, you cannot see any dark heart in the tree. So what we, and again, this is another example you see again. You see this nice clean looking board from the supermarket, nice clean looking board. The price, look at the price, and you have some kind of, like discoloration. Look at the price. So that's again, this is an example of how that kind of discoloration impacts the price of the wood. Now our goal is, yes, you can look at the outside of the tree and say this is a veneer, this is grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. But when the tree is standing, you don't see what's inside, right? So our goal is, can you use the outside tree characteristics? Can you use some outside tree characteristics to say something about the heart inside the tree? Is it possible? And also in this study, we're looking for some of the variables that we usually can measure and get in the field. When we go in the field, we're looking for variables that we routinely measure in the field so that this can be practically applied when we can use this thing in the field. So our goal is to try to find out, are there external tree level tree characteristics that we use some outside tree characteristics to say something about the heart inside. And if yes, what are the tree characteristics that have some kind of relationship with the proportion of dark heart inside the tree? Okay, so today in this talk, I'll be presenting 2 different objectives. So what I'll do is I'll just talk about the first objective for now, and then later on I'll talk about objective 2. Okay, so our first objective is we'll try to look at external tree characteristics, and we also look at sight, the effect of sight on the proportion of dark heart, but we did not get any promising result on that, so I'm not presenting that, but I'll just briefly mention that. But I'll mostly present like whether outside tree characteristics can say something about the proportion of heart inside or not. So that's our first objective, and I'll talk about that. So I'll briefly tell you about the different methods and the measurements we get to answer our first objective. So what we did in Wisconsin, we sampled 3 geological units in Marathon, which is the central western part of the state, Cooper Falls, which is the northern part of the state, and Hollyhill, which runs through north and south, the center of the state. So in these 3 geological units, And we had someone silviculturist now in our team too, so he said that they have different soil types. So we want to sample from different soil types. That's what the 3 geological units. And in this, from these 3 geological units, we sampled 10 different sites. 10 different sites at each site. In each site, we had 20 trees in each site. So we sampled 200 trees for this study. Now, so when the first sampling, we had some restrictions. So because the tree has to be harvested for this kind of study, so we had to collaborate with landowner, logger, and you have to have their permission to sample the trees. So we have to visit active logging sites, active logging sites. And one condition is that those site has to have at least 20 sugar maple trees for our sampling purpose. And the tree has to be 12 inches in diameter. If you're familiar with this, but when you're a log that can be turned into boards, to be a saw log, you're small in diameter, usually according to the Great Lakes Timber Professional Association standard, has to be 10 inches at the smaller end. Okay, 10 inches at the smaller end. So we chose 12 inches diameter so that the smaller end of the log will be at least 10 inches to qualify as a saw log. So after selecting our trees, so first thing we did is we collected data on sites. We collected soil sample, so we collected drainage information, and so we have the information of soil pH. So we collected soil samples, analyzed in the lab, in the University of Wisconsin lab. The soil pH information, soil texture information. We already have the geology information, 3 different types. Geology information, we got some soil chemistry data, soil type, drainage, and things like that. Again, we looked at the effect of sites and also compared this, these different variables between the 3 geological units. We did not see any effect of site on the proportion. So one of the reasons could be we have only 10 sites and 10 samples per. So that might be a small sample size to see any effect. So I'll not be presenting the result from this work. Just to give you an idea, we will also look at the site information and see that site have any relationship with the part proportion of the tree or not. Now, so we collected standing tree data. So this is my graduate student. So he's learning Joel Kaminsky. So he got his master's thesis out of this project too. So he's measuring the tree. So what we did is we collected the data before harvest, the standing tree data of the standing tree before harvest. So what we the kind of data we collected, again, we are looking for routinely measured variables that are routinely measured in forest inventory and easy to get and easy to apply. So those are the kind of variables we're looking for. So we measure the total height, the merchantable height of the tree. Again, this is before harvest. Crown height, so that we can calculate live crown ratio. Notice in live crown ratio is indicator of tree vigor and health of the tree. So we wanted to see whether the healthy, faster growing tree has some kind of relationship with the proportion or not. Look at the diameter of the tree. This is one of the routinely measured variable whether tree size has an effect on the proportion of dark art. The form class diameter. So in forestry, we calculate something called a form class, and it's called Girard form class, and that's an indicator how much taper you have on a tree. And, if you have a higher form class, Girard form class, the tree has less taper. If you have a lower form class, there's more taper in the tree. So we're trying to get the form class. We also look at the defects, different defects on a tree, outside crown defect, bolt defect, and we ranked the tree as having from 0 to 3. 0 means no defect. 3 means a lot of defects in the tree. So 0, 1, 2, 3 defects in the tree. The crown width, volume, bark texture, and log grade. Again, grade you can build a log grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4. Again, using those statistics I described before. So these are the kind of information. So you can grade a tree, standing tree, as well as a log after harvest. Okay? So these are the standing tree data we collected, data for a standing tree. And then so in bark texture, we classified bark as smooth, rough bark, and saggy bark. And we combine these two categories. Later we combine these two categories. I don't know if you're familiar, but in sugar maple, a lot of other trees, bark texture has been related to health and growth of the tree. Even in our data, we saw that tighter bark, tight, nice looking bark, those kind of trees are healthier and has higher growth. And there are other studies that show that too. So the reason we measure this is sometimes growth, you have to core a tree or get a stump to get the growth information. But if you can say something by just looking at the bark and say something about the growth, that might be useful. That's the reason for using the bark information. Okay. So then we harvested our tree, okay, before, and then we collected the data standing tree, and then we harvested our tree, and then measured the information on the harvest merchandise log. Okay, I want to mention that for this study, we only use the first log or the first 64 section of the tree. So all the data, everything I'm presenting is related to the first log. The reason is in sugar maple, most of the value comes from that first log. Okay, that's the reason we're focusing on this first. But there's another study where we try to model how that heart moves through the tree and come up with some kind of model to do that. But I'm not talking about in this product. In this presentation. So the merchandise log, we measure the length of the log. So if you see log, this is a log, this is your small end, this side is the small end diameter, this is the large end diameter, right? We measure the inside bar diameter at the small end of the log, at the larger end of the log, and then hard diameter. If you see this, and so this is the diameter of the heart on the longer axis. We measure the diameter of the heart, both at the smaller end and large end. Large end, and we measure the stump height and also the log grade after cutting the heart characteristics. You know, your heart could be irregular, small, circular, different kind of shapes. So we collected information on that too. Age of the tree, so by looking at the stump after harvest, we counted the number of leaves on the stump to figure out the age. And also using the stump, we also measure the width of the last 10 years. To figure out the growth rate of the tree for the last 10 years. We want to see if there is some relationship of tree growth with this kind of dark heart or not. Now, so what we did is we want to look at the effect of the heart. So what we came up with something called heart proportion. Okay, so it's a ratio of sum of heart diameters at both ends of the log divided by the to the sum of inside bar diameters at both ends. The ratio of these two variables. So we want to see what proportion of this diameter is the log diameter is covered by that heart. Because you know when you're cutting the log, you cut from here, start from here, right? So that diameter affects the amount of defect-free wood you get from the log. So we come up with this variable called heart proportion. So we were looking at effect of the different tree characteristics on that heart proportion. And what is the relationship of different tree characteristics with the heart proportion? So for our first objective, so we figured a linear mixed model. And again, our dependent variable was that heart proportion. I told you that was our dependent variable. And we use different tree characteristics as covariates in our model. And because our trees were within the site, right? There's some kind of some of you do a statistical hierarchical model, right? So so we use because site as a random effect in our model. We use site as a random effect in our model. So yeah, our dependent variable was heart proportion, yeah, and our fixed effect and all the three characteristics we're looking at is a form class, the 10-year growth, crown volume, total height, crown ratio, log rate, DPH, age. So these are, so we're trying to look at whether these variables can say something about the heart proportion or not. And we're trying to come up with some kind of predictive model too, but we did not test the model or validate the model. I don't know how the model works, but at least we tried something. And again, site was included as a random effect. And so what we did is we come up with different, so all the different models, but combining these different variables, we came up with different models and we ran the models, and based on AICC and weight, we selected our our best model from this data. So the result, so the best model had diameter, growth, and log grade. That's good news for us because a lot of these things can be just easily measured and seen from outside. So you can see what I want to just focus here, estimate, just this estimate. So you see deviate as a positive estimate, positive, so it's a positive effect. That means the bigger the tree, higher the proportion, the greater the proportion of the dark heart inside the tree, right? Growth had negative effect. So higher the growth, last 10-year growth, or higher the growth, it was less the proportion of dark heart in the tree. And then you can see the log grade. So grade 1, remember, grade 1 is the highest or the good grade. And as you go grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, so as the grade decreases, right? As the grade decreases, if you go from grade 1 to grade 2 to grade 3, grade 4, the amount of the proportion of dark heart increases. Okay, so proportion of dark heart increases. So DBS growth and the grade, outside grade, was related to the proportion of dark heart inside the tree. So just to show you the same information as a matrix. So we calculate the mean, we divide it into different diameter classes, get our tree into different diameter classes and different grade. Okay, you can see that. So here I want to present. So let's focus on this grade 2, this column. Okay, so you can see for the grade, for same grade, as the diameter increases, right, the proportion of heart increases. So that the numbers are increasing, right? So as the diameter of the tree, even the constant grade, as the diameter increases, the proportion of heart increases in the tree. Okay. Similarly, you can see, like, let's focus on this 16, number 16. You can see as the grade 1 to grade 4, right? The same diameter tree, as the grade becomes worse, this is good grade, this is bad grade, right? As the grade worsens or declines, proportion of heart increases. Proportion of heart increases. The same thing presented in a figure, Again, this is grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4. And this is the diameter, this is the heart proportion. So this is grade 1, grade 2. As the grade decreases, the proportion of heart increases. Similarly, if you see here the diameter, from the diameter, as the diameter increases, the proportion of heart increases too. Okay? So good thing about the result is the DBH, we routinely measure DBH, right? So the bigger the tree, most likely that you will have the dark heart in that tree. So one of the reasons that's presented for that, and there's other studies done in other part of the country too. So when bigger trees are usually older, and right, when you tree have bigger trees, like bigger branches and bigger wound, and there will be more chances of the probability of infection will be higher in the bigger tree. And that's why, that they will have higher proportion of dark. That's one of the reasons, even for why a bigger tree might have higher proportion of heart. Log grade, good news, yes, outside grade, you have a better grade, less defects in outside, better grade tree from outside, that might have a less proportion of heart inside. So good grade tree might have lower proportion of heart inside the tree as well. So, and the good thing about this is these two are routinely measured, and this can be, at least this can tell something about the dark heart inside the tree. Now, another thing is trees with higher growth tend to have low heart proportion. Trees with higher growth tend to have low heart proportion. So yeah, it's hard. Yeah, we have to explore a tree or look at the stump to get the growth information, but we can use the bark as the substitute of the growth. So tighter bark, tighter, nice looking bark, and the tree will have the better growth. And those kind of trees will have, you might have less proportion of heart in those kind of trees. So the good thing is external cues can indicate internal quality. So there are some external indicators of heart proportion inside the trees. We can use some external characteristics to say something about the dark heart inside the tree. So what I'm trying to see here is, when we are growing supermaple trees, one of those, so the things, if you want to maximize the internal rate of return, so what they do is, right, if your first, let's say your first, like this is a grade 1 first law, okay, grade 1 first law. And so, and this will get better price or veneer law, right? Sometimes what they do is instead, they instead of harvesting this tree, when they are harvesting, they leave this tree in hope of getting better grade on above that. Better grade above that. So what we saw here is if you leave this tree in if you're greedy and you leave this tree for a long period of time, there's a chance that it might the proportion of internal damage or discoloration might increase and you might lose this grade. So instead of maximizing, we did another study with looking at the internal rate of return and how different sizes and the time period impacts the internal rate of return. I'm not economist, so I'm not presenting through this collaboration. I'm not presenting that result here. I'm not a finance guy, so we did that study. So one thing is, yeah, if you leave the tree, then you might lose the grade because of the increase in the heart proportion. So yeah, so that's one of the things that managers can think about that they can use from this study. So maybe if this is veneer, then maybe it's better to harvest the tree, so that we don't lose that grade. So that's one of the some of the important conclusions from this study. So again, this is my graduation, just to give you an idea pictorially about what I was talking about. So even with this tree, if you look at this nice tight looking bark, not big tree, right? Not too big tree, nice tight looking bark. There's no defect, nothing around this tree. This tree, now we harvest this tree, you see there's no heart inside that. It's nice, clean. There's no heart inside the tree. Okay. But the same thing you see here, this is a tree, there's some kind of knots and then branch that this big tree, not nice looking bark, rough, saggy kind of bark, right? If you harvest this tree, then you can see that inside there's a big proportion of heart inside the tree. So that's the conclusion of those are the main results from our first object. Yes, there is some kind of relation just between outside tree characteristics. And not only me, there are other studies done in New York, Michigan. They have also looked at and they found similar results. The grade, the DPH can be used to say something about the heart inside the tree. Now, another objective, so is let me show you this picture first. So if you see here, some of the heart is like this is just sometimes a nice uniform looking kind of heart. Some of this heart is irregular, right? Irregular funky shape. So this will affect the proportion of the log more than this kind of nice looking heart. So we want us to see that can we use again some of these three characteristics to predict whether the heart is irregular, this irregular heart, this is regular uniform heart. So we want to look at whether we can use the symmetry characteristic to say something about the likelihood of having an irregular heart. Yeah, so that's another objective. So we want to look at the three characteristics and see whether we can predict the likelihood of having an irregular heart or not. Yeah. So for that, we use some mixed effect logistic regression. So this is log odds, right? We're trying to predict the log or odds of having irregular heart. The odds of having irregular heart using the three-level variable as OV, again, the random mixed model, or site is the random effect in this case also. So this is again our dependent variable was if the tree had uniform not tree had irregular heart, we classify the tree as 1, right? If we did not have irregular heart, it's 0. So that's our dependent variable. Again, we look at some of these three characteristics, dependent variables in our model. Again, the basic routinely measured variable. But one thing is we look at defect also. When we look in the see outputs, can we say something from looking at the outside defects on the tree? Can we say something about the likelihood of having irregular heart inside the tree? So, the result in this case also get diameter was again the diameter was significant. So bigger the trees, more likely that they will have irregular heart. But what's surprising, not surprising, but what the age had negative effect. Age had so younger trees would have a better heart. Sorry, younger trees were the likelihood of having an irregular heart, younger trees was higher than the older trees. So what I think here going on here is, for the same diameter tree, right? If the if the tree is of same age, right? And if the, let me back up and say that again. So here, given the same DBS, right? Younger trees will have more likely will have irregular heart than the older trees, right? So same DBS of young tree and old tree has the same diameter. That means the young tree is going faster, right? Otherwise, a younger tree will not have the same diameter as an older tree. So what I'm suspecting is, when you have faster growth during the heart formation period, that might lead to this kind of irregular heart tree. So that's the speculation here. So yes, there are the A's and W's, significant tree level factors that could predict tree changes having an irregular heart. We're surprised that defects are very important in the heart formation process, but in our study we did not see the outside defect. There's no relationship between outside defect and the likelihood of having irregular heart in the tree. So, and then finally, we just see the same thing. We wanted to see whether some site-related work. We want to do site-related work. We see some site had something to tell about the irregular heart in trees. So what we did is, but remember, we have only 10 sites. There were only 10 sites. Also, there are only 10 data points for this kind of study. Okay. So what we will be looking at the site characteristics. Can some of the site characteristics like soil characteristics or geological formation, can we say something about irregular heart by looking at those variables? Okay, that's the objective of this work. So what we did here is we had trees in different sites, right? 20 trees, and we looked at proportion of trees with irregular heart. Okay, so we had several trees in each site, 10 sites, they had several trees. Each side, we looked at how many trees had irregular heart, and then we calculate the proportion. So the trees with irregular heart divided by the total number of trees, right? That gives you the proportion of trees with irregular heart. So we're looking at trying to see whether that we can say something about that proportion by whether the site characteristics can explain something about that proportion of trees with irregular heart. So. And again, our dependent variable was we will use better regression because we had a small sample size of not normally distributed data. We use better regression for that purpose. And we use geological unit, soil chemistry, and soil texture as our independent variable in the model. And again, I don't want to bore with you with this, but again, we use the logic lead function with better expression. And the result here is, again, we did not see any site effect. Did not see the effect of site, okay, but we did see that there is difference in geological formation. So the marathon, the marathon formation had the highest proportion of the trees with irregular heart. One thing we did not do is maybe we should have looked at the size of trees in this formation. Maybe marathon had higher number of bigger trees, might have higher number of irregular heart, but we did not look at that information. So at least we see there's some kind of, at least the data shows there's some kind of relation between the different geological formation. And so you can see these are negative coefficients. So Cooper Falls and Holly Hills have less number of trees with irregular heart. So we don't know why that is. So one of the things we should do in the future research could be is very important. So if you have maybe large number of sites, we have like a sample size, bigger sample size to see what are the effects of soil or geology, things like that on the proportion of heart. That would be interesting future study. So again, the marathon, the conclusion, so marathon formation had a higher proportion of trees with irregular heart than Holly Hills or Cooper Falls and Holly Hills formation. So those are the things that's what I'm presenting today. Okay, so we could say something. So in conclusion, we could say something about the proportion of heart by looking at external tree characteristics. And then we also irregular heart, we can say the life, at least the DPS and age explain the likelihood of irregular heart in the sugar maple tree. And then some influence of geological formation on the likelihood or the proportion of trees with irregular heart. So those are the main conclusions from this work. And this is already published in Journal of Forestry. This work was published in Journal of Forestry. And good thing is my graduate student who got presented this in SAF conference in Portland, 2009. So we won third prize for the poster competition for this work. So yeah, and we collaborate with a lot of different lumber companies and a lot of people who help us with this work. So a lot of logistics was challenging. We have to contact the loggers, the lumber company, make sure they are harvesting, when they are harvesting and things like that. And we funded this project. And this is our happy face after finishing our field work. This is me, one of the graduate student who was working at the time. This was my student. He graduated and was working for a Tigerstone lumber company. And he also helped us finding some sites for the work. And this is my graduate student. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Yeah.
How old does your average sugar maple live to?
So again,
How old can they get sugar maples?
we had trees like the oldest tree was like we got more than 100 years old in our data. So yeah.
I guess I have two questions. So first, I'm just curious, does the integrity of the wood change at all with dark heart, or is it just an aesthetics issue?
Aesthetics issue, but some studies have shown that because of that microbial activity, some kind that can lead to rot also, but it's usually the aesthetic issue. In most of the time, it's the aesthetic issue.
And then the other question I had was, so you've had this relationship between DBH and the probability of having, or the proportion of, yeah, so does the total, I'm going to say this like I know what I'm talking about, but I'm not a forester.
Sure.
Does the total, I guess is the word board feet, does that change between the two scenarios? Because you're getting, smaller log, no dark heart versus larger log where you still have more proportion, but you've got some area that's unimpacted.
So, yeah, say that again. I think that's an interesting observation.
Yeah, I'm just curious if the total,
So you were saying like that if you have smaller log, so you're
that does not have any dark heart,
right?
and then you got a larger log that has higher proportion, but it still has, and it looked like from those pictures that there's an area around the outside that would still be high quality.
So what you're saying is if you're getting the same amount of good quality volume,
Right. Yeah.
but the product, so the product, because of the size of the dark heart, the grade of the product might change. So
Okay.
that will impact the price.
Right.
So if they classify your log as already, before harvesting, they'll look at the heart and they'll classify as, okay, this is grade 4. So your price decrease immediately, right? Doesn't matter. It's not about how much board feet you
That
can
makes
get.
sense. Okay.
So that's one of the things. Yeah, I think but that's an interesting observation like that. Yes.
I'm just curious, so the dark heart starts at a certain age, like not all trees get dark heart. So I'm just curious at what age the dark heart is more likely to start at. or to develop.
It's because injury, when you have like injury, so I'm not familiar, like, and you brought a good point, so I don't know this age, like there's a certain age, I don't know, I'm not sure about that. Might be, but I have not read any study where saying, okay, that dark heart starts at age this, but I'm not familiar with that.
Is dark heart becoming an increasingly bigger problem in the industry? Is it something that you're seeing?
That's one of the reasons we carried this project was we were requested, in fact, by the Crutch Lumber Company. One of it's in the central Wisconsin. They are very hardwood lumber company. So they wanted to answer this question. They wanted because they are having issues with them. They wanted to answer this question, and they come up with, okay, can you do study like this? And that's why we came up with this project. So. Yes.
You had a slide earlier in your talk that had a lot of possible causes of dark art. It seems like there's a lot of still just unknown about what actually causes it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Did you have, and then you had a lot of models with a lot of different independent variables. I was wondering if, you found either support or either were able to think about your models as a test of some of those hypotheses for what might cause dark art. Could you at least rule out, like maybe crown height could be testing the hypothesis of tree health related to, can you draw any sort of testing mechanistic hypotheses from these models?
You mean the reasons for dark hypothesis related to?
That's exactly right. The reasons, underlying reasons, it'd just be correlation, but maybe you could at least, get some inference from those models.
There are, we're looking for practice, but there are some studies done in like Canada. So where they are like specifically cut the cookies from a tree, different and at certain and look at defect, at certain different heights and how that defect penetrated. And at every point on the tree, they measure the proportion of heart and also like what are the defects surrounding that area, what is the height of the tree, what is the diameter. So there are some studies that have been done to test those kind of things too. Yeah. And they have found, so one of the reasons they talk about like, and again, I should say, like, and there's like throughout the community, there's a consensus that there's this kind of start injury to the tree and microbial activity. So injury and then injury that the microbial activity, and that will cause the dark heart. And some folks have looked at the damage immediately close to the heart and what kind of damage and how that has impacted the proportion of heart in the tree as well.
Okay, so there is some evidence.
Some evidence, yes. There's.
So I know you mentioned that the dark art doesn't necessarily compromise the integrity of the wood, but more so the aesthetics of it.
Yeah.
Do you know if there is any type of purification process in the works that could sort of cleanse the dark art and then stable the product economically?
That I don't know about that. But I don't think so. I might be wrong. I don't think so. Like if they have some mechanism that they would not be worried about this.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, great questions. Thank you. Any other questions?
I have one.
Should we check?
Y'all hear? Can you hear me?
And I think we do. Yeah, the pizza is where.
Well, Adam has a question. So Adam, to answer your question, I'm not familiar with the, because sugar maple that usually is with natural degeneration and there's no. So I'm not familiar with any studies that look at the tree genetics and how that is related to the dark art. So yeah, I don't know. But I have not throughout my review, so I've not seen any study that did some genetic study and really and try to explain or link that to the dark heart and tree. I'm not familiar with any study that have that. So to answer your question, I don't know. Could be, it could be genetics, could be, yeah.
Okay.
But I don't know any studies that do that.
Thank you again for coming. And invite everyone to stay and have pizza and talk with Nilesh.
Thank you.
Are you surprised? With the other studies going on in other states, are they facing similar?
Yeah. This is, it's from New York, Maine, they've done some Maine, In Michigan, you know, so I think in terms of world food Michigan had the highest amount. After that, it's New York.
Did they, so when you came back with them with the financial, probably ask this over.
Yes, yes. Look, we had one of my colleagues, collaborated with
This deal was guys so that as far as forming these hypotheses and forming the research.